All right. Good morning, everybody. If you'll open your Bible to that passage from Isaiah 42. New year, new you, so they say. I'm going to preach from my iPad this morning. So first, last time I did it, Siri thought I was talking to her in the middle of my sermon, and she talked back to me. So if that happens, I don't ever talk to Siri, so I don't know why she would think that I was talking to her. But we're going to attempt something new in this new year and get technologically savvy. Isaiah 42 is going to be our text. So good to see so many of you starting the year with us. And my name is Matt, by the way, one of the pastors here. Maybe a bit of context. I'm not a huge fan of business meetings, and not necessarily because I don't see the value of business meetings, but my role, I get to attend a fair share of them. Probably my negative assumptions of business meetings is attached to just seeing so many go off the rails through the years in one way or another. But because of my role, I end up attending a number of business meetings, and this year, a couple of times behind a mic, I heard someone say something like, I'm going to take a point of privilege here. All right. Now, being a guy that doesn't like formality or business meetings, I don't really know what that means, but my assumption of what point of privilege means is, hey, I got a microphone and I got a title, and so I'm going to do something that I'm not really supposed to do here, and just kind of rant for a couple. Well, that's typically what happens after someone says they're going to take a point of privilege here. So what I'm going to do this morning, I still don't really know what point of privilege means, but I think that's something like that. I'm going to take a point of privilege as a pastor this morning. It's an odd Sunday. We're in one service. Life hasn't kicked back into full gear. My attempt this morning was, rather than kicking off our new teaching series, it seemed best to wait on that until next week. So rather than working through a book of the Bible, I'm gonna anchor us in a unique passage from Isaiah 42 and provide what is an exposition through that chapter. But I'm gonna take some privilege and just kind of do fireside chat with our church, and a little bit of a challenge for you as we start the new year. So this is not typically the way we might preach or the way we might speak, but even if you're an outsider visiting with us this morning, I think the reflections will be helpful for you. It really is a good gift to have a new year, even if you're not bent towards goal setting or planning. The new year marks something of a new start, a fresh start, a time to kick back into gear. And it's appropriate that we have this kind of internal compulsion to want to make progress, to try to up our game, to get better at things. It's a good gift for us. And I would suggest that impulse actually speaks to something of being created in the image of God. We're people who want to make something of our lives. We're future-oriented people. And as Christians, the desire to more appropriately, more increasingly reflect the nature and character of God is a good gift from a good God. Think of what would happen if that was taken away. You had no impulse to make progress. You didn't desire growth. There's something of the creative nature of God's character that we reflect when we say, I want to cultivate and care for the life that I've been entrusted, to make something of the garden, as it were, of our lives. And so this morning, I want to read Isaiah 42 with a New Year's lens for us. It's not really a New Year's text, and frankly, it's not even a passage that's primarily written about us. The passage, as Kathy just read, the introduction, if you've got your Bibles open, you can see it most clearly in a print copy of the Scriptures and not a technological copy. You see that it's divided in these three main rhythms. The passage overall is about God, his work in the world, and specifically his work in the world through a servant, specifically through the Messiah who would come. If you've been at Christ Fellowship for any length of time, we actually address this passage in our Servant Song series, because this is in a string of passages that point us forward to the coming Messiah. As such, it tells us a ton about the God whom we image, the one who we are called to reflect. And so I'm going to couch my sermon this morning in these three main divisions, leaving a lot of room for fireside chat on the back end with our church. The first big division is God's promise to send a servant. God's promise to send a servant. So if you're taking notes this morning, just three simple divisions that follow the three main contours of this text, this chapter for us. God promises to send a servant. The passage that Kathy just read ends in verse 9 with the prophet Isaiah saying these past events have indeed happened. The promises, the things that he said were going to happen in chapters 1 through 41 leading up. And now I'm going to declare to you new events. I announce them to you before they occur. So God, through the prophet Isaiah, is telling the nation of Israel things that are going to happen. And there's scholarly debate on when he's doing this. Some assume this is a precursor to the exile. Others see a longer division there and see him writing even after the exile has happened. He's speaking to a nation that is experiencing the judgment of God for their sins. And if you look back at the introduction to chapter 40, he begins with this, comfort my people, comfort the nation of Israel. So these passages are meant to be a comfort to wayward people. And why would they be a why would they be a comfort to wayward people? Verses 1 through 8 tell some specific things that God is going to do. Again, just let your eyes kind of drift over that paragraph. God the Father says he's not going to give his glory to any other worthless idols, but he's going to give his glory to a servant, to the one in whom he delights. The passage tells us that he's going to put his spirit on that servant. And that servant's going to do some really great things in verses 1 through 8. He's going to bring justice. He's going to open blind eyes. He's going to proclaim freedom to prisoners who are in dungeons. This passage, if you're familiar with the scriptures, calls to mind Isaiah 61, a later text that Jesus actually reads in the scroll in the temple to inaugurate his ministry, but it's almost a repeat performance of these verses. This is what I have come to do. And specifically, this servant is not going to put out a smoldering wick. He specifically, as one, is not going to grow weak. He's not going to give up on the work. And the conclusion is in verse 7. What will this servant accomplish? I will watch over you. I will appoint to you. You will be a covenant for the people and a light to the nation. So in summary, God pledges to send his servant to fulfill his covenant love to his people. Then bookended on this passage, look in verse 18 and following, the second main division. We're going to treat this like sandwich bread this morning. God promises to send a servant on the front end, and then on the back end, Israel is blind and deaf. Israel is unresponsive to these coming promises. The back end of this passage, beginning in verses 18 and going through the end, are not all that glamorous. Look at the start in verse 18. Listen, you deaf people. Oh, you deaf ones. The back end of the passage recounts a common theme through the Proverbs. I'm going to tell you stuff, but you've got your fingers in your ears. You're not listening to this. And if you've been with us throughout the last year, remember in Luke's gospel, this was a common theme for the disciples, wasn't it? I'm going to tell you things, but you're blind to hear. You're blind to see. You're deaf to hear. You're not responsive to these promises. They were blind and deaf, like the silly gods they worshiped from among the nations. So he starts with an accusation in verse 18. Listen, you deaf. Look, you blind, so that you may see. And again in verse 20, notice, though seeing many things, you don't pay attention to them. Though your ears are open, you do not listen. And such are the implications of blindness and deafness. They're seen in how the chapter comes to a close. Look in verse 24 and 25. What happens? Who gave Jacob to the robber and Israel to the plunderers? Was it not the Lord? Have we not sinned against him? They were not willing to walk in his ways, and they would not listen to his instruction. So he poured out his furious anger and the power of war on Jacob. surrounded him with fire, but he did not know it. It burned him, but he did not take it to heart. So God takes full responsibility, and however you date this latter half of Isaiah, God's taking full responsibility for the judgment that the people are experiencing. We see this again throughout the prophets' writing. They're kind of looking around. Why is this calamity falling on us? And it's like God in the corner saying, hey, it's me. Like, I'm really trying to get your attention. I'm really trying to do these things so that you would see and respond. So God acts in judgment on the perpetual waywardness of the people. He judges them for their sin against him. But it's this last phrase that I think is really haunting about this passage and is worthy of reflection. The concluding note really begins to bring the passage within view for us. God did these things. He gave them his word. He revealed his character. He even judged their sin. But notice how the passage ends in verse 25. The people didn't take it to heart. That's a really haunting summary statement. They didn't take it to heart. It's worth meditating on that phrase, I think, for us for a minute. What does it mean to take something to heart? We actually have the positive parallel to this in the Christmas story. Remember when the shepherds come to Mary and recount, God's been faithful. This is exactly as he promised. Luke 20, I think it's Luke 2, I think it's 19 or 20, says Mary treasured up all these things and pondered them in her heart. Okay, this is the parallel idea, positively. She took the shepherd's words to heart. They had resonance to her. Luke recounts that Mary treasured them and pondered them. She heard God's faithfulness and she took it to heart, whereas Israel heard and saw God's activity, but did not take it to heart. Okay, so a moment of meditation for you. Can you think of a time where you actually took something to heart? Something that, my guess is something in 2022 got your attention, jarred you. Probably something that was hard or overwhelming or new or different. I mean, I'll use a simple one. For the Rogers clan, we just bought a car for our oldest kid, right? And there's something to the awakening. We got 3 teenagers in the house, and we're getting up on Christmas morning. There aren't many more years that we're going to have like this. When we wake up on Christmas morning to my kids recording, the break-in scene in Home Alone where the burglars are coming in and the voice, we're going to pump your guts full of lead, right? Okay, this is how our kids got us up on Christmas morning, by recording that in our Alexa to alarm to wake Sarah and I up, and then they jumped on our bed, okay? So, it's great. You're whatever. You just... be glad you don't live in our house. All right. So, all the creativity and newness of that, but then there's this sense of it's kind of sad, right? Not many more years that are going to play out in this way. So you feel sad, but if you're doing it right, that sadness causes you to take something to heart. The knowledge shapes how you then in turn live. You don't stew in sadness. You say, man, I really want to take full advantage of these years. I want to laugh a lot in 2023. I want to make memories. I want to cherish the years. I want to have fun while there's still time. So let's do a big idea and a contrast here. Those with eyes to see and ears to hear take truth to heart. It has resonance in their soul, in their heart, like the seat of their being, such that it shapes their actions. In contrast, then, those who don't have eyes to see or ears to hear, they still receive truth, but they don't take the truth to heart, meaning it doesn't change anything about their activity. So then, let me ask you to consider a few big truth claims that we make around here and ask, have you taken them to heart? I'm just going to cherry pick 3. You'll hear us say in our family values, God has saved sinners through Jesus Christ so we can pursue him. Or God has united those he saved to one another in the local church so we can live connected. Or lastly, God has lavishly given his people great treasure, so we can open-handedly and wholeheartedly give generously. Three fairly basic good news truth claims that most of you who are members of our church would say, yeah, I agree with that. The question then is, have you taken that truth to heart? Meaning, has it had resonance in your being such that it shapes your actions? So, summary question to ponder. Do your current practices of pursuing Christ, living connected, and giving generously demonstrate that you've taken these truths to heart? Do your current practices in these areas demonstrate that you've apprehended truth in such a way that it's changing your behavior? Okay, last consideration for us. God continues, idea number 3, God continues to work out his good promises in spite of the people's sin. So this is the meat between the sandwich bread. Front end, God's going to send his servant, his Messiah. He's going to fulfill his promises. Back end, Israel's going to be blind and deaf. In the middle, and before we get this blindness and deafness note, is I'm going to continue to be faithful. I'm going to act even though I know how this chapter is going to close. You're not going to be responsive to that. God is not caught off guard by the perpetual waywardness of his people. Isaiah 42 declares that he knows the future promises, and he knows his people will continue to disregard this loving kindness. But in verses 10 through 17, sandwiched in the middle, we get a sense of God's activity here. The first 3 verses, verses 10 and 12, this is the way Walker kind of called us to worship this morning. They give a positive refrain. How should you respond if verses 1 through 9 are true? Well, you should sing a song to the Lord. Verse 12, you should give glory to the Lord. You should declare his praise from the coast to the islands. Why? Because verse 16, this is one of the beautiful promises tucked in this, what is a great chapter. I will lead the blind by a way they did not know. I will guide them in paths they have not known. I will turn darkness to light in front of them. Notice the picture here. He's talking to people that he's just going to declare they're blind. I'm going to turn darkness to light in front of them. Rough places into level ground. This is what I will do for them. And then this note of conclusion. I will not abandon them. Wow. So God's not going to give up on blind and deaf people. He's not going to abandon them. Praise God. I mean, how much does your spiritual journey testify to that reality? God has not abandoned blind and deaf people. This is the story of Christmas. It's the story of your sanctification. It's God coming to make his blessings known far as the curse is found. He's going to act, and his actions are described in verse 13. And this is where I want to laser our eyes for just a minute. How's he going to accomplish this salvation? How's he going to prove to Israel that he has not abandoned them? Verse 13. The Lord advances like a warrior. He stirs up zeal like a soldier. He shouts. He roars aloud. He prevails over his enemies. If you're a Bible writer or just a note taker, kind of underline or highlight there the 5 descriptions of God's activity. How's God going to get what he wants? How's he going to accomplish the salvation of his people? What's his action like? We get 5 active verbs here in the text. He's going to advance. He's going to stir up zeal. More on that in a moment. He's going to shout. He's going to roar. He's going to prevail. At least 3 out of the 5 of those have animal kingdom overtones, don't they? Right? The picture of a lion overtaking the language there. Specifically, he's going to advance, he's going to roar, he's going to prevail, okay. Overtaking a foe. It's the second phrase in this list, though, that caught my attention this week. The language there, I think it's worthy of our reflection as we start a new year. The Lord gets what he wants. One of his actions is described as stirring up zeal. The Lord is going to stir up his zeal to accomplish his purposes. Now, not to undermine your intelligence, but let's reflect on that phrase for just a second. So in the original language, the language of stirring has kind of two shades of meaning, and both of these are things you can kind of get yourself in. The first of stir would be to awaken from a slumber. Okay, what many of you did this morning, because you stayed up too late last night, right? The slumbering morning where you're not all that with it, and you rouse yourself, you stir yourself. You're sleepy, so you attempt to awaken, and a little coffee goes a long way with that, right? The second shade of meaning is stir as resuscitating a flame that's about to go out. Okay? So stir as awakening from slumber, or stir as in fanning into flame something that's about to go out. And this is a great contrast. Look back in verse 3, what he says to sinful people. I'm not gonna put out a smoldering wick. Okay, so I think this is probably the shade of meaning that's most implied here. You spend any time outside, you know this picture. Campfire's dying down. It's not been tended. The embers are barely visible. So what do? You stir it. You resuscitate it. You bring it back to life. This is what is described in relation to God's actions here. Now, surely God is not sinfully negligent in the way we are. But what we see in the text is God rousing to action. On the basis of his covenant faithfulness to his people, he stirs himself to activity and moves to save his people. And specifically, what does he stir himself to? To zeal. The Old Testament zeal is synonymous with the word jealousy. And if you think about this for a moment, it makes sense, right? He arouses his jealousy. He arouses his jealousy. It makes sense in context. God is jealous for the worship of his people. Look in verse 17. They're giving it away to all these worthless metal images, calling these gods. So he awakens his jealousy and acts to save them. He fans into flame his zeal, and he goes to get his people. Okay, not a surprise to us. This is the good news message, that God saves sinners. Where I want to press us this morning is, what does this language of stirring zeal have to do for us? How do God's actions inform our New Year's journey? Note if you have opportunity to turn here, you could just jot it in your notes. Romans 12:11. Romans 12:11. This is after the bend in Paul's letter to the church at Rome, where he tells them to offer them their whole selves to God, pleasing worshipers. And then he begins, if you remember Romans 12, it just kind of bullet point list, delineates the activities of God's people. Here's what you should be doing. And one of those is almost a parallel to this in Romans 12:11. Do not lack diligence in zeal. Be fervent in the Spirit. Serve the Lord. In other words, we act like God when we give ourselves wholeheartedly to resuscitating, to stirring, to awakening our zeal. And we do it not God as jealous for his people, but we resuscitate that zeal to our singular love for God. We resuscitate our zeal to respond to a God who has zealously acted to save us from our sin. And this is a good and necessary call for us as we think about a new year. Christian, stir up your zeal. Fan the flame of your passions for the Lord. Using my point of privilege this morning, I want to stir up your zeal using the cards that you found in your seat this morning. If you'd grab those and look at them. If you don't have one, perhaps you can look on with a neighbor or buddy. What did it look like for you to stir up your zeal, your love for the Lord? This morning, I want to call you, fireside chat style, church, the people of God here, our local assembly, to one theme for 2023. This year is going to be the year of living generously for us as a church. The year of living generously. Each year, I select one of our family values and present that to the pastors. And we attempt to press that family value to the forefront of our life and ministry as a church. It's not that the other values don't matter, but by focusing on one value, we're able to highlight the necessity of that value and celebrate the fruit that comes when that value is embraced. Also, it gives me a chance to say, what might be a value in our church that's kind of been marginalized, or maybe just in our culture, we just need to remind ourselves of, to give attention to. So this year, we're going to call ourselves to live generously. One theme, one action. And the action for each of us is to take one step to resuscitating our zeal. One step to awakening our slumber in these areas. Much like physical fitness or nutrition, the reality is we all stir up our zeal in different ways, or maybe better said, we start at different places in stirring up our zeal, right? We come at it at different places. But what we all share in common is that it is true that everyone in the room can take one step to stir up zeal in living generously in response to the goodness of God this year. So one theme, year of living generously, one action for all of you, take one step forward, 3 areas in which you can stir up zeal this year. One, that you would give yourself to God's word. That you would give yourself generously to the word of God. You'll notice in each of these 3 areas, we've put 3 specific steps and then one kind of unique step. It's not a unique step necessarily because it's unique from the other 3, but it's unique in that it may not be applicable to the entire congregation, something that maybe a subset of the church would be able to resonate with or step inside. Giving yourself to the word is the overarching category. And an appropriate step for many of you would be to take a step forward in engaging strategically with the scriptures this year. You can do that next week. You guys seem to like the worship guides that we had for the Luke teaching series. We're going to do that again. If you're not a worship guide follower, a consistent note taker, this can be a great place to start. We put together a Bible reading plan. They are actually on both sides and the back of the church. 5 days a week Bible reading plan. You get 2 swings and misses. This is awesome, right? A good Bible reading plan that you can follow, to pick up a worship guide, and to engage with the sermons each week. That is a good and appropriate step. Starting next week, we're going to rewind the tape back to the book of 1 Samuel and begin a 52-week series called The Rise and Fall of Kings. We're going to trace the lives of Saul, David, and Solomon from 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, and the first half of 1 Kings. And we're going to try this a little bit differently. So church, you're going to have to be generous with us. Rather than doing a bunch of mini-series through the year, we're going straight 52 weeks. So buckle up and hold on, all right? So we're going to start 1 Samuel next week, and we're going to end middle of 1 Kings next Christmas. And other than a weather break, we're going to keep plowing through and see how these kings both exemplify the character that we are to pursue and what we're to avoid, and also orient us and point us forward to the true and better King, Jesus Christ. Another appropriate step for you would be to memorize a passage of Scripture each month. If you're like, hey, I'm doing that, I'm taking some notes consistently, I'm engaging in the Word, maybe I've done a Bible reading plan in the past, an appropriate step for you is we got a captain, and that captain is going to post a Christ Fellowship Cherrydale Scripture Memory Passage of the Month. Okay? And we're going to rally people around that specific text. I say passage, don't get super overwhelmed. We're not going to give you a chapter to memorize. But we want to avoid the cherry picking a little verse out of context and try to give a larger context. So this will be 3, 4, 5 verses that we're going to commit to memorizing together month at a time as we journey through the year. Okay? Step 3, for some of you could be those who are consistently memorizing Scripture, in taking the Word to say, I want to commit to using the Word of God to share the good news with somebody once a month, okay? We know we do a spiritual formation survey in our church annually. We didn't do it this year, but in years past, the average member of our church shares the gospel 2 times a year, okay? And that's by your own on record. So if you committed to say monthly, I'm going to intentionally have a good news conversation with somebody that's far from God but close to me, that would be a huge step forward for a large subset of our church. And then the unique step, we've got a group of people who want to memorize the book of Colossians together, okay? This is a bigger beast. We're going to rally a group of folks together and commit to memorizing Paul's letter to the church there, work through that over the course of the year. And then next year, we're going to do a handbell deal, and they're going to, I'm just kidding. That's not going to happen. But it's going to be awesome for them to memorize, for us to memorize the book together. The second big header would be to give yourself generously to the church. To give yourself generously to the church. And there you will see the same pattern. 3 steps and a unique step. To regularly attend to register to attend connections. If you've been attending the church, the best way that this happens for me is every time that we receive new members, we'll ask existing members to stand, and like half the room doesn't stand. I know I've seen y'all for like 2 years now, right? Like, come on, right? Register for connections class. Jump in if you're like, I don't really know, man. I'm not sure membership is right. We've got some books in the front on church membership, the value of becoming a member of our church. Hugh's going to kick off a new connections class, and you can register there. We would love to have you take a step to officially planting your flag and saying, this is my church. Step 2 for another subset of you would be to join a small group, to attend regularly, and to invest yourself in developing genuine relationships there. Join a small group, attend regularly, invest yourself in developing genuine relationships there. Step 3 is to sign up to serve in an area, a specific area outside of kids ministry in the life of our church. So we need all hands on deck, or as many as can, in kids ministry to help and to do those areas. We also want to call people to some specific ways. A great example of that would be this morning, we had people leaving the parking lot because they couldn't find places to park, okay? We're landlocked. There's not a lot of parking. We've got like 3 layers of parking spots out there that are all convoluted, and it would be a wonderful blessing to have a group of people who said every week, I'm just going to make it a priority to be out in the parking lot, to hold umbrellas for people, to help them know how to get to our church, to discourage members from parking close and making them go park across the street, you know, those kind of things. That would be a real blessing for us to have people who agree to serve in those ways. And then we're going to kick off a pastoral residency for men who are prepping for pastoral ministry, and you can see that unique step there. Then lastly, to commit yourself, to give yourself generously to the mission. When you think giving generously, my guess is money is the first thing that comes to mind. And I wanted to orient us to, like, giving generously is not just giving of our financial resources. Give ourselves to the Word. We give ourselves in service to one another in the church. But it's not less than giving our resources. It is no mistake that Jesus attaches our affections to our financial resources more than any other area. Your money and your heart they're linked in a way that you can't break. So where your money goes, your heart follows. Or where your money goes, that's a reflection of your heart. So for some of you, a step is just to commit to consistent giving, to register for automatic giving through the online portal. What's really not important is how much at this point, but just that you're consistently giving. A step for another subset of you could be to work through a family budget, to see how you're spending your current money, and talk about, is there a one-up step that you can take in your generosity to the church. Step 3 would be to find one of our One Mission partners and find a sacrificial way to bless them this year. It could be through monthly giving. It could be a gift such as care packages to bless and encourage them. And then a unique step for some of you Could be to scholarship somebody to go on a short-term trip to visit one of our One Mission partners. Particularly if you're unable to go physically or otherwise, your schedule doesn't allow, to invest financial resources in making it possible for someone else to go, particularly younger folks that may not have the discretionary income to do that, can be a tremendous blessing. The question is, what would it look like if all of us took one step forward in each of those areas this year? Would that be a reflection of stirring up zeal? So back to our passage this morning, why should we care? I mean, why care about things like scripture memory or church membership or financial stewardship through the local church? I mean, after all, we got a lot of other stuff to attend to if you're like me. This year is going to bring all sorts of comforts and challenges and joys and frustrations. There's all sorts of to-do lists already been made, and many of you are already dreading Tuesday or Wednesday or whenever life kicks back into high gear for you. And we're not even speaking about sinful things that you might give yourself to. Just a lot of living to do. Tons of decisions to make, plans to execute, and daily tasks that are important, even if they're temporary. So why stir up zeal? I'll give you a looking down view and then just kind of a street level view. Stir up zeal because it's a reflection of God's character. You stir up zeal because committing to these endeavors reflects the zeal of God our Father, who zealously saw you in your sinful plight and did not stew in slumber, but stirred up his zeal to save you. And to give yourself whatever your step is a reflection of the God whom you worship. And then kind of a ground up. My guess is, particularly adults in the room, if you look back over 2020 and 2022, and you say, what were my wins? Like, what are the things that I'm truly thankful for over the course of this year? My guess is they're going to be closely connected to these three areas. Your wins are going to be memories of God's faithfulness to his promises through his word. There are going to be times when you were walking through something really difficult, and God, by his Spirit, reminded you of the truth of Scripture that you didn't feel in the moment, but you knew to be true. And you clung to that. And you were building a house on a rock before the rain and the wind ever came. And when the rain and wind came, it was the rock that was holding you. You give yourself zealously to these things because in the times that you need it most, it's going to be the truth of God's word that's going to hold you. Give yourself zealously to these things because in the times that you need it most, for many of you, the people that you're sitting around this morning have become friends. They've become family. For many of you, they've become closer than family. Your beautiful memories are attached to the people of God who have labored to come around you and care for you and speak truth into your life. And then you get the joy of seeing faces like Jacob and hearing stories like Josh Springs and being to visit these mission partners and others that I'm looking at this morning that are preparing to go and know that your meager resources are making a difference such that the gospel of Jesus Christ is going among the nations. I'm not devaluing the temporal stuff that you'll give yourselves to, but friends, there is no more important or vital thing that you could attend to than stirring your affections for God's word, for God's church, and for God's mission. Before we close and standing and sing, let me give you 2 minutes of silent personal reflection. We're going to sing 2 songs to close this morning. Oh, and the cards. Here's what I want you to do. I don't want you to frivolously say, yeah, that's me. I would like you to take them and just put them in your Bible. And the next few times that we're together, we're just going to use these collection boxes up front. There's something to, we don't do this a ton around here, but there's something to physically saying I'm committed to that. That you would just drop that in my name, put them in, and here are the 3 areas that I'm committing to this year. Then we've got a captain who's going to follow up with people that check each of those areas. Okay, so people that say we're going to memorize Colossians together, they'll get a follow-up from someone, people that are wanting to serve, so on and so forth. So next couple of weeks, we're going to drop them in the collection boxes. Then we'll follow up with a way that you can specifically take a step forward there, or hold you accountable to that step. All right, so let's have a minute or two of private reflection. How is the Spirit of God provoking you to stir up zeal this year? Maybe some confession of slumber. And then we'll stand and sing to a God who stirred up his zeal to save you and I.